Hello everyone. Today we are from Group 2 want to present about unit of translation.
Okay, the first here a statement from Roman Jacobson. Roman Jacobson is an expert. He claims that all cognitive experience and its classification is conveyable in any existing language. The meaning of cognitive experience is all that get processed by our mind to become a language. Then, only poetry, by definition, is untranslatable, since in verse the form of words contributes to the construction of the meaning of the text. And then, dichotomy in translation between sense or content on the one hand and form style on the other. In this case, the translation can be classified into two. The first one is the one hand and the second one is form style on the other. Well, we jump to the second slide. On this slide, you may see two kind of boxes. The right one is form or style from the source text, or we can call it literal, and then the second one is the sense or content as a target text, or we can call it idiomatic. Both of them are different. We start from the literal first. Literal translation is more oriented to the style and form of the source language, while free translation or idiomatic translation is more oriented to the sense or meaning of the source text to be rendered into the target text. Well, how about idiomatic? Yeah, idiomatic translation make every effort to communicate the meaning of the source language text in the natural form of the receptor language.
So guys, here I will explain to you the types of translation according to Larson, from very literal until unduly free. Literal translation. An interlinear translation is completely a literal translation. A literal translation sounds like nonsense and has little communication value. It means sometimes if we translate a word or a phrase, it will make no sense in the receptor language. For example, here in Indonesian we use selamat pagi, and then literal translation for selamat pagi is safe morning. When greeting someone in English using safe morning, it would invite frown. It simply makes no sense in English. So the appropriate greeting is good morning. The next one is modified literal translation. Being uncommon, a truly literal translation is partially modified. Translator modifying the order and the grammar enough to use acceptable sentences structure in the receptor language, while the lexical items are translated literally. In a modified literal translation, the translator usually adjust the translation enough to avoid real nonsense and wrong meanings, but unnaturalness still remains. The next one is idiomatic translation. Idiomatic translation, according to Larson, use of natural form of the receptor language, both in the grammatical construction and the choice of lexical item. A truly idiomatic translation does not sound like a translation. For example, here in English, foreigner, and then in Indonesian, idiomatic translation is bule. It uses the natural form of the receptor language. The next one is Andali free translation. Andali free translation contains ideas which are not included in the original text and change the historical and cultural fact of the original text.
Comprehensibility and traceability. Literal translation often fail to consider that not all texts or text users are the same. For example, not all texts are as serious as the Bible or the deacons, nor as pragmatic as marriage certificates or instruction on the medicine bottle. Also, not all text receivers or users are the same as those who read the Bible or deacons, nor as people who simply use translation for a purpose to get things done. In the translation, there are some important factors to consider, such as text type, target audience, and purpose of translation. If you ignore this factor, it will lead to the pedantic form of literalism, exaggerated adherence to form, and almost total obsession with accuracy. And there is a problem with many published target texts, that is impaired comprehensibility, an issue related to transability. What is transability? It refers to meaning can still be adequately expressed across languages, regardless of differences in linguistic structure, such as grammar, vocabulary, and so on. Meaning has to be understood not only in the terms of what the source text contains, but other factors as communicative purpose, target audience, and purpose of translation. Another criterion or factor to consider in translation is target text comprehensibility. There will be some unique source text values that will defeat our effort to convey them across cultural and linguistic boundaries. But translation is always possible by using cultural gaps as another principle. To achieve this, target text comprehensibility needs to be considered.
Ideal translation. Transferring exact source text meaning by obeying the rules of text target. Ideally, translation is a process of transferring meaning from the source language to the target language by obeying the rules of the target language. According to Larson, the goal of the translation should be to reproduce in the receptor language a text, which communicates the same message as the source language, but using the natural grammatical and lexical choices of the receptor language. Types of translation. So in this slide, you will see the example of types of translation according to Peter Newmark. So let's check it out. The case or the figure 2 show the types of translation by Peter Newmark. The continuum goes depending on which emphasis the translators want to orient themselves to. On source language oriented translation range from word for word translation, literal translation, and faithful translation. This is usually called semantic translation, in which the translation preserves the semantic of the source language. On the other end of the continuum, The target language-oriented translation range from adaptation, free translation, and idiomatic translation. The focus is on translating communicatively. So here you can see that there is a table that showing the source language emphasize and target language emphasize.
The next is translation units. The translation strategies, literal and free, are linked to the different translation units. Literal being very much centered on adherence to the individual word. Free translation aims at capturing the sense of a longer stretch of language. Okay, the next is text types. Katharina Reis in 1977 classified text into 5 types. There are literature, journalism, newspapers, scientific, and official document. The first one is literature. Literature have subtypes such as prose, poetry, and drama. And the next is journalism with oratory, essay, and articles. And the third one is newspapers with editorial headlines, brief news, feature stories, advertisement, classified. And the fourth is scientific. Scientific such as expressions, terminology, argument, footnotes, and references. And the last one is official document, such as business report, laws, diplomatic documents, military documents, etc.
The next is Mona Baker. She stated that the meaning can be carried by units smaller than the word. The equivalence at the level of word, collocation and idiom, grammar, thematic and information structure, cohesion, and pragmatics. No one-to-one correspondence between orthographic words and elements of meaning within or across language. This is the explanation of equivalence at different levels. Translation process involves transferring the smallest unit of translation from the source text to the target text. The translator's task is determine the smallest unit to be translated at different levels at which the equivalent is solved. Then the meaning can be carried in the different levels of hierarchy. There are the hierarchy. The first is phoneme level. Phoneme level often done when translating proper name or geographical name. For example, French is often transliterated into Prancis in Indonesia. And the second is Jakarta is often pronounced as Jakarta. The next is morpheme level. It is the smallest unit of meaning. Morpheme in the source text sometimes has equivalent in the target text. The examples are non-profit means nirlaba, non with nir. The self-sufficient means swasembada, self and swa. The prehistory means prasejarah, pre and pra. But we need to know that some do not have one-to-one equivalent, especially in the inflectional morphemes like the ing, ed, or es. The next is word level. Translation at the word level is the common norm in translating. For example, yesterday he came here. That means kemarin dia datang kemari. The simple sentence means easy to translate. This is the higher level of translation example. Let's go Dutch means yuk makan tapi bayar sendiri-sendiri. The next is phrase level. Typical example of translation at this level usually deal with idiomatic expressions. For example, a fly in the ointment. That means rintangan kecil. A drop in the bucket. That means setetes air di lautan. The salt of the earth. That means putra terbaik. Non-idiomatic phrases in Indonesian usually have different word order from that of English. The next is word order. English and Indonesian phrase have different word order. Let's see. In the English phrase, it consists adjective plus noun. In Indonesian phrase, consists of noun and adjective. For example, in English you say beautiful girl. In Indonesian, you say gadis cantik. The translator needs to remember this difference when they are translating noun phrase from and to Indonesian.
Next, there is a translation at the sentence level. So this translation deals with proverbs or peribahasa and fixed expression. For example, birds of feather flock together. In Indonesian, it would be translated into rasam minyak ke minyak, rasam air ke air. This proverbs means that people will eventually go back to their group where they belong. So both in English and Indonesian, the readers who understand the language will understand the meaning of the sentence. But if we see, the noun is different, like birds in English, and in Indonesian it becomes rasam minyak. So it's different, but the meaning of the whole sentence, when we read the whole sentence, we could conclude the same meaning. Another example, to kill two birds with one stone. In Indonesian, that would be sekali merengkuh dayung, 2-3 pulau terlampaui. So you got the meaning, right? However, some non-idiomatic expression can also be translated at sentence level. So it's not only proverbs or fixed expression, but also it can be non-idiomatic expression, like do not imagine such vain things. It means jangan begitu naif. And then, will you leave a message? That means apa yang harus saya sampaikan kepadanya? And then there is text level. At this level, the unit of translation is the text as a whole. The example of this is the translation of prose and poetry. You can take a look at this poetry by Robert Burns and then translated by Suryawinata et al. Sometimes a word or a sentence cannot be understood in isolation without looking at the text. The unit of translation in this poem is the text. So although there is no one-to-one equivalent between the form of source text and target text, the content of the poem in the source text is equivalent with that of the target text. What is a good translation? We can hold on the ABCs of translation. A for accurate. It means that reproducing as exactly as possible the meaning of the source text. B for beautiful, using natural forms of the receptor language in a way that is appropriate to the kind of text being translated. And C, communicative, expressing all aspects of the meaning in a way that is readily understandable to the intended audience. There is also Larson's definition about best translation. He stated that best translation is the one which uses the normal language form of the receptor language and communicates as much as possible to the receptor language speakers the same meaning that was understood by the speakers of the source language. And the last maintains the dynamics of the original source language text. Maintaining the dynamics of the original source text means that the translation is presented in such a way that it will evoke the same response as the source text attempt to evoke. The last is Nida's dynamic equivalence. It's about formal correspondence. It means it focuses attention on the message itself in both form and content. Also, it's about dynamic equivalence, which is based on the principle of equivalent effect. For example, Lamb of God is equivalent with Seal of God. So that's all from us. We hope you learned something new from this presentation. Thank you.